Hello everybody, my name is Sylvain Rochon, and today I want to talk about technological empowerment. I am the Paradise Engineer. So let's talk about technology. It's been a little bit of time. I've been talking most about mindsets and ideas recently, but I want to go back to tech a little bit and how technology and how it's advancing can be used to create something really amazing. And technological empowerment, what I mean by that is it's not anything new. It's always been there. For example, in the early 20th century, when we started seeing cars like out in the street, a lot of people were really concerned. We're saying the cars are moving too fast. They're dangerous. They are even like the vehicles of the devil. Like that was the more Christian point of view of kind of a refusing of the possible advantages of vehicles, cars on our roads. And that was mostly because people didn't understand it. They were fearful of it. They were used to what they were used to. So horse and buggies and moving around. And it was to a lot of people perfectly fine. Just like today, things are perfectly fine for a lot of people. It kind of works. It has problems. But in the minds of a lot of people, new technologies, new ideas are kind of scary because they don't understand it. But we've always struggled with technology and the new. It engenders fear. So the point is, if you're circling back to cars have been empowering. We've expanded in our way. We travel all over the place, all over the world, faster, better. Now, like in our daily commutes, if you use a car to commute, or even if you use the bus or a train, you travel farther than most people would walk or throughout their whole life 100 years ago, because you can go much faster and it's much more convenient. And we even nowadays we're talking about self-driving cars, which is an empowering technology that would eventually lead us to not need to own a car at all once it's kind of established and people are getting used to it, instead of going from a horse to a car where you don't need to take care of the horse and feed it, and it's you need to take care of it like a pet would, like you'd need a pet. A car, okay, there's some maintenance, but generally speaking, you can just leave it on in the parking lot and it will be fine. You just have to gas it up and have it service it once in a while, not every day. Right? With the self-driving cars, you won't need to own the car anymore. It's going to be like an Uber. Self-driving, just bring it. It brings you to where you need to go. Safer than right now. You don't need to drive. You don't need to know how to drive, and it gets you there. So that's technological empowerment. Scary it may be for some people, it empowers. But there's a lot of more exciting things than self-driving cars even, which is an interesting tidbit of technology. What I really want to talk about you today is things that are more fundamental than travel. I want to talk to you about some basic stuff. Food. Talking about the environment. We're worried about taking care of our environment, right? So food is a big thing. About 40% of our fruit and vegetables up here in Canada and in a lot of places in North America come from California. Well, that takes a long time to get here. A bunch of carrots grown in California will take about 6 weeks before it's on my table here in Ottawa. Well, that's a long time, which means the vegetables are sprayed and kind of kept and frozen and whatnot, so that when they get here, they're actually somewhat fresh. And there's even some genetic engineering into play for some species, so that they don't rot as fast when they're taken from the ground. And that's the species that are put into the ground to grow in the first place, because they know in California, fruit and vegetables need to travel far. So all this stuff is really nice. These are advancements. But what if we can grow our carrots and our fruit and vegetables locally even if they're plants that don't belong in the same climate. So we have greenhouses, okay? But greenhouses tend to be expensive, and they are using very traditional means to generate the yield. So we don't tend to buy from greenhouses very much because they tend to be expensive, more expensive than traditional farming, even though they're taken from far apart. But now we have far away. I mean, now we have vertical farming that is kind of rising out and emerging as a valid business in technology. A lot of them is in states and areas that you'd expect that are more innovative, like in California, for example, where there's a lot of growing going on. So the vertical farming is a great experimental area there. But vertical farming essentially happens in a building. So you can put that anywhere. So you can apply that to a city and have vertical farms there inside the city boundaries or really close by. So you're going from growth to the table within the same day. You can have fruit and vegetables on demand instead of even going to the grocery store. So instead of ordering your food, like many of us do during COVID, ordering your groceries from the grocery store, you can get some of these items directly from the farm, just like you would do in the good old days when most people had a farm, or at least a neighbor that was. So you get your produce from the neighbor or from somebody else. So very low environmental impact. For one, because whatever is grown in a vertical farm is grown indoors. There's no pesticides, no herbicides that need to be involved, because it's a contained environment where you don't allow undesirable pests to be around your plants. And because of that, you can control also any kind of bacteria or fungus and things like that. You're controlling the environment. At least the farm is controlling the environment. So that means no chemicals added to the food. Also, we're talking about 400% more yield, or it can be less than that, but it's a lot more yield per square meter than a traditional farm. So you get huge amounts of produce in a very short amount of time. And then it kind of goes out. Additional to that is that the vertical farms, because you're controlling the environment, you're using about 90% less water than in the traditional farming environment. So that's good for the water supply. So it's great for the environment because you don't need to transport food long distances. You don't need to store them very much or less. And you don't use chemicals, and you use way less water. The downside is that the setup cost of a vertical farm is much higher than a traditional farm, because in a traditional farm, all you need is good soil, parcel of land. You need to kind of till the soil, and then you can start planting right away, because you're using free sunlight onto your food, and then the water kind of falls from the ground. Not necessarily consistently, but you get a lot of free stuff, but you don't control the environment, and therefore the yield is much smaller. And you're not layering in vertically, you're depending on all that surface area. So vertical farms are expensive to set up. Once they're set up, they have a certain amount of running costs. You get a lot more yield, but you're also using electricity to generate that the sun rays. You're using LED lights or certain types of lights for the plants chlorophyll to capture, because that's how plants generate their own sugar and whatnot. But you have full control over that. So there's additional running costs and additional setup costs that are not present in the farm. And the farm has running costs that vertical farms don't. But basically what we're seeing is that vertical farms could produce fruit and vegetables that are much cheaper than traditional farms once they become scaled. Like once you get a lot of them and get reused to them, and the technology kind of refines so that it's kind of cheaper to run and so on, which will still take a number of years. But we're at the cusp of that. So again, empowering a population with having on-demand fruit and vegetables. So if something happens in California to your fruit and vegetables, well, you don't get them right now because there would be a bad harvest and there's lots of fires there or whatever. It could become dry one season. Well, if you're using vertical farms in each one city, then that city is dependent on the produce it's growing locally inside those controlled buildings. And if something happens to one of the cities, well, there's huge amounts of cities around that can support that demand fairly close by. So you can have a logistics support system within the region that can help if there's anything that happens like to the power grid and whatnot. Now you can say the same about cultured meats. Cultural meats use up 99% less land than a traditional farm with beef or chicken or whatever it is, 95% less water as well, because animals do consume lots of water. And the meat that's created from the culture, this is lab-grown meat, what we call it sometimes. We don't add any hormones to that, so it's environmental friendly. Not only, I mean, in addition to that, which we don't really think about, those animals eat vegetables, if you would. Sometimes they are actually vegetables like corn, or it could be wheat or hay that needs to be grown in a traditional farm. So you're using the space and you're polluting the farmland where the animals are, and you're also using some farmland. So it's extremely expensive. That's why it kind of costs a lot of money to eat beef. So it's like I read somewhere recently that a beef patty, actually to produce one beef patty for a hamburger, for example, to create that, you're using about nearly 5,000 liters of water, because the animal drinks water, like the cow is drinking lots of water over its lifespan before it's slaughtered and produces X amount of beef patties equivalent. But that's a huge saving. That's why you're using so little water. Now, cultured beef is also not refined enough. Cost needs to go down a little bit still, but it's about the same price as real meat. The consistency and the texture is not there yet. Thankfully, we have the vegetable alternatives of beef, where we were able to engineer heme protein, which is makes beef taste like beef. It's part of the blood, and it's still in there, and then it tastes like beef. So we have alternatives, proteins of heme, vegetable heme, that we can put in vegetables to make it. With the right vegetables, it tastes like meat. Impossible Burger, for example, if you haven't had that, it tastes like beef, but it's entirely made out of vegetables. So we kind of have alternate meats also. But the point is, if you're using cultured meat, or you're using vegetable protein to approximate meat, these can be done also within city borders. You don't need all that land. So that's technology that empowers people, because then, again, you can have meat and vegetables on demand, and we have more control over it. You can have on your home, you can have solar panels to generate the energy from your home. Plus, you can have an alternative plug-in with the city, with maybe a small solar farm, just in case something happens to the city as a backup. So you manage your own electricity locally. Something happens to the grid, you're fine. Something happens to the neighbor, you're still fine. And you get to choose perhaps what kind of power system you want, what style, and how much power do you need. And you can invest in that as an individual. That empowers family. It kind of decentralizes things. You can also generate your drinking water using metallo-organic frameworks, for example. That is a type of material that acts a little bit like a catalyst. It doesn't get used up, but it captures water from the air and dumps it into a container. And it's like distilled water, so it's completely clean, devoid of bacteria or viruses or anything like that. And then you get to drink that. So you can have that at your house as well. Again, technology that empowers individuals and families to live, to have basic stuff, to at the house, decentralized, disconnected, no chemicals that need to be distributed, because all this stuff, when it's centralized, it needs to be disinfected because it needs to travel or stagnate at certain points in the city or elsewhere for a certain amount of time, and it needs to keep. And these are things that are perishable. They actually change in state, becomes unhealthy over time because of contact with the environment, with bacteria or rots in case of vegetables, right? So this is all stuff that can be done in neighborhoods and houses and inside villages and cities all over the world. Doesn't matter where it is. All we need is to develop that technology, make it a little bit more affordable by economy of scale, and also by refining the tech so that it's the same quality level or better than what we currently have. And then we end up with less chemicals as well. And all this land that's being used and all these transportation systems that are being used to bring everything and carry everything here and there, they're not needed anymore. So nature can claw itself back, which is good, because we need the oxygen generation from nature. And that's all really, really good things. And we want to move in that direction because it's for our best interest and the best interest of nature. As I was reading the other day, I made a video on this for somebody else on overpopulation. And I'm actually posting below a link on my overpopulation video where I talk about. Also, I have an article. I may put both links there. I talk about how overpopulation is not that much of a big issue. Like, it is an issue because technically, the planet should hold maybe up to 2 billion people max, and we're going to reach probably when it's going to plateau due to how our reproduction kind of works and still trends in multiple nations, should plateau at 10 billion or so in the year 2050. And actually, that's not the whole story, but it's a discussion for another time, because we talk about longevity in some other of my videos, and we may live a lot longer, and which kind of changes all those numbers too. But in any case, it's kind of flattening because of information, contraception, distribution, and the more educated we have, the more available contraception is to multiple nations. While the lower, the more people tend to not make babies. So like countries like Japan and South Korea, they have essentially a negative growth in their country, which is good because we want to have less population. It's amazing. But think about these technologies that I just mentioned that provide the basic needs. Well, if you increase the population and you keep things centralized, well, that means you have to build centralized system, which means more pollution. You kind of add to the problem. If in the future, instead of, we're still going to have a population increase, no matter what. It's still gonna grow in most places, but if we can decentralize all these basic needs, then we don't need all these expensive centralized systems that take care of everything. We can empower each individual, and that gives a bit more responsibility to the individuals and families, which is fine, because then they care more about what those technologies mean, and they care more about their development and their improvement. It encourages private sector to do better, faster, cheaper. And that encourages AI innovation. That encourages all sorts of really good things that leads to a future that is very, very desirable, where we're moving away from work and more AI and less people at work. Like I talked about this many, many times. And hopefully basic income will help bridge that the current future to the next future. But bottom line is that we can put ourselves into a position where we have way more power over our destiny by having power over the natural resources that we need at a basic level. And that is an amazing thought. It's something that we work towards very, very quickly. And entrepreneurs can participate in that. So I'm encouraging you to do exactly that. Let's move towards those technologies. Politicians won't decide for you. This is strictly about people interested in buying into those technologies because it benefits them. Politicians will establish rules and regulations and will transform, cities in a certain way that will please what the people want. And we're voting with our dollars into the private sector that are building all those technologies and refining them. So let's encourage those those technologies and those businesses by innovating ourselves. If you're an entrepreneur, invests time and money into those techs to bring it to the table, to make it appealing for Joe Blow anyone. Joe Blow anyone will invest in it because it's better than letting the government decide for you, especially if the price is right and you got choices. And then everything kind of goes with it. The politicians, just like for anything else, they're going to see the trend and they're going to apply regulations to help control risks and help control distribution, make sure everybody's getting what they're supposed to get, and there's no cheating and all that stuff. That's on them. But right now, let's push the innovation, baby. Bye-bye for now.